quote Kingpin, "It's bending like a banana." That is a hell of an arc. Holy shit. They really torqued the hell out of that. Oh my God. We talked about this last time. God, it's so gross. This is so nasty. And then we've got the factory dust problem where at the right light angles you can see it's just like everywhere. It's just... Alienware got tired of us finding all the flaws in its Aurora lineup of pre-builds. I should not be holding this way, although it's not worth anything. This is lazy and cheap. So it brought back the big guns. This is big enough to blot out my light from that entire side of the studio. This is the Area-51. Area-51 is a name we haven't heard in a long time, except for that one incident in Nevada, but we can't talk about that. As for the Alienware Area-51, we bought that for independent review, and it's here. Speaking purely about the PC itself, this is the most significant positive effort we've seen from Alienware to date, including an overhaul to thermals and a new focus on industry standard parts. They have QR codes everywhere to detail how users can service the parts, which has been our #1 Alienware complaint for about a decade now. They've switched to using fewer proprietary components, meaning more user serviceability, and that's a huge improvement. But Alienware still had some negatives, like the inability to manually control fans. The biggest negative, though, is the price. We paid $4,650 for this, which at the time of purchase was $1,500 more expensive than DIY at the time we put the pricing table together. And that's with the $400 off of the, quote, estimated value, end quote, a number that Alienware claims is based on competitive data. Now, we looked into this claim that it's based on competitive data, and what we found is that instead, it's based on something we call bullshit. But it's better value than Origin, which is gonna be that's our new award. It's not gonna be it's better than Dell anymore. Now it's gonna be it's better than Origin. They've earned it. Now, under normal circumstances on value alone, we'd say that the Area-51 is eliminated from consideration. However, Origin and some of its competitors put Alienware into a new perspective where somehow even a $1,500 higher price than just parts from a store looks doable. Now, the thermals and the construction for this are massively overhauled from previous Alienware boxes, and that's where they've gotten the biggest improvements. So that's gonna be the most interesting today, but let's get into it. We brought you this video with store.gamersnexus.net and our tabletop gaming dice kits, which currently have a promotion, including a pouch of Snowflake the Cat miniatures with each autographed Snowflake kit. These are the very same as are embedded in the dice, plus a bag of inductors for each autographed e-waste inductor kit, which would be great +1/+1 counters, poison counters, or similar for your tabletop games. These bonus miniature packs are only available with the autographed models because we have a limited amount of them. We spent around a year developing our tabletop gaming dice, each kit including 7 high-quality sharp edge resin dice, including D4, D6, D8, D10, D percentile, D12, and D20. These come packed in fully custom wooden boxes with a GN Alchemy logo, and all Snowflake dice kits include a foil Snowflake the Cat MTG-style card, with each e-waste inductor dice kit including a custom-made foil goblin creature token. We worked to refine the quality and even test for weight on these, and Alienware and other companies have made improvements to their systems following our reviews, which we're thrilled about. However, to continue the high cost of buying these machines independently for review, we rely on your help. Visit store.gamersnexus.net and remember that all autographed units of these dice kits will come with their respective miniatures while supplies last. Thanks for your help. So the Area-51, it is a big improvement, and it's not something that is just we don't outright hate it like we did several of the previous Alienware systems, because there are things that are done competently in here. So if they're fighting on value, that's a much better place for them to fight than on value and on does it even work properly. So they've mostly fixed that part, which we're going to talk about today, and that is excellent. Now, we'll start with the price comparison. Prices for DIY were taken at the end of May, and were as close a match as we could find to Alienware's selection. We did not try to fine-tune for the part selection, so we basically chose the closest things we thought matched. And the reason we do this is just to get some kind of gauge that most of us in the audience and GN are familiar with in terms of component value and pricing. Now, there are a lot of valid reasons to buy a pre-built and not build it yourself, and that we're okay with. We're okay with people buying pre-built. That's why we review them. We just use the DIY pricing as the best baseline we can get. And then if you want to build your own, you'll get to see kind of the difference in value if you have the time for it. The new Area-51 comes in 13 different configurations, up from just 3 when we ordered, all with the Intel Core Ultra CPUs, unfortunately, and NVIDIA RTX 50 series GPUs. Our configuration has a 285K, an RTX 5080, 64 gigabytes of DDR5 6400, and a 4 terabyte SSD, with the 4 terabyte SSD being a huge upgrade over Origin. Along with that is a 360mm liquid cooler and a 1500 watt 80 plus platinum rated ATX 12VO power supply. Now on just the SSD alone, this is already a huge improvement over Origin, which you could spend like $6.5 grand on and somehow only get a terabyte of space. Value discussion for Alienware still though is a total non-starter. The DIY total comes to $3,091 at the time we wrote this and put the table together, putting it at about $1,560 less expensive than the Alienware $4,650 ridiculous price tag. Expressed another way, the Area-51 is 50% more expensive than DIY parts cost. There are cheaper pre-builts out there. So if you're opposed to DIY, and we understand why people buy pre-builts, then there are still cheaper options. We think the Area-51's case is probably more expensive to produce than the manufacturing cost of our Lianli Landcool 216 RGB substitution here, but that's obviously not enough to really sway the math. It's also not really relevant to the end user. The biggest updates to the Area-51 are the construction, the build quality, the fact that you can replace the parts and use standard ones, and the thermals. So almost everything is a huge improvement here. And Alienware actually felt so confident about this that when it was making these changes, for the first time in years, it actively contacted us and said, hey, we have this thing coming out. Would you, one, like to know about it? And two, would you like to get one to review? And we said, no, thank you. I mean, it's that they feel confident to do that is great. It's not an Alienware thing. We just don't accept pre-builds from anyone for review. And the reason for that is so we can see the entirety of the process of the pre-built, and that includes purchasing it. But we did buy one, obviously, and it's pretty interesting. Alienware went with a traditionally laid out large tower case with far more ventilation than its past designs. As a reminder of how bad it's been before, we made an entire video fixing the dumpster fire known as the Alienware R13. Wow, that looks pretty damn good. Man, if we can fix this thing with just a 240mm cooler, Dell's gonna go and implement it and be like, look, we fixed it. And we're gonna be like, no, that was just like, that was us trying to spend less than an hour fixing it. So I hope if Dell is like, hey, we should implement that, then they'll be happy. I just want it to be clear that I will not be happy. I will still be upset. So just to save everyone the time now. On the new system, the top, front, and most of the bottom are all intake, actually, leaving the meshed out rear as totally passive exhaust. Particularly interesting are the two 180mm fans of the front panel, in some ways reminiscent of the Fractal Torrent, which at the time they were probably designing this would have been the top performing case in our case benchmarks. There's roughly 35mm of clearance in the front cutout, which should be sufficient to avoid too much restriction despite looking covered. It helps that the hub centrally is the part of the fan that loses the most access to air, and yet it's the only part of the fan that the air can't go through, so it doesn't matter. The dust filter inside the panel is magnetically retained for easier cleaning as well, which is a nice feature. The CPU is cooled by a 360mm liquid cooler with access to fresh air through the top, with a dust filter that slides out to the rear, retained by a screw. The bottom also has a dust filter. The last couple of Alienware systems we've done have been really difficult to take apart. They've had basically the old original, like decades old metal chassis frame, and then they've encased it in plastic. This one looks a little easier. It is totally redesigned. It is an Area-51 rather than an Aurora though. And first thing is we need to get the panels off. This lock is held in with this screw. And then after this point, this is as far as I have taken it apart. And so we'll be learning about it at the same time. So that turns. Let's do the test. I'm gonna push the button. Let's see if it has a catch. Okay. I always get a little nervous with that. This is a heavy panel. So it did have a catch. Okay, it passes the Trikes test. We should name it after them. I'm sure they'll be flattered. Power supply's down here. Looks like some manufacturing dust, which we've actually seen that on Dell systems, especially the video cards in the past. So there's just some leftovers from the machining. And then pre-wired running SATA down here, which this is a nice touch. This is a good attention to detail by them to actually just like put it there so it's ready if you want it. So I like that. Cable management is really well done. This is one of the areas that pre-builds tend to pretty much always do well, is routing the cables. Historically, it's been good though, so that's not really an improvement from them. Now it's just a matter of the inside of the system. So video card is relatively large, but there is obviously plenty of room to upgrade. One of the comments Vitaly made immediately was large box with relatively little room inside of it. I mean, if you look at just like the amount of space for this front panel is massive, considering none of this is usable space. I mean, the reason they're doing this is because to make this gap smaller would be really detrimental to cooling. 180 mil fans are not particularly good at static pressure performance, which you need to overcome a panel that's really close and on top of them. So they have the right amount of space there. Same for the bottom. This is a huge power supply shroud. It is getting used. The power supply is in there, but there's also fans in here, and they're taking up about that much of the space. And actually, a shot like this, you can see the power supply. The rest of that is space above it for the shroud. So that's where we're losing some of the vertical in the case. But anyway, first things that jump out at me. Mechanically, this is every bit as complex in cool ways as past ones. Unnecessary, I guess, but you have to remember that Dell is really tooled up to do serious mass production in ways that some of the other SIs aren't. And so stuff like this, where they've got these latches that I think are going to either pull the fans individually or pull the whole cage once we loosen those screws. This is the spring mechanism for that side panel. So this is mechanically, it's not like difficult, but it is extra complication. There's this bar that actually was in past Alienware systems as well. This is just covering the side of the radiator. Now the past, yeah, this is still, the past it was they specifically marked them as like not pulling or levering on the bar because it's not that strong. And then internally, a couple things that jump out immediately. So the fin stack, the heatsink for the MOSFETs, the VRM, I'm actually liking how it's finned. This I would probably dice it the other way because the fans are blowing air in through, so it would flow through this better if they diced it that way instead. So that's my immediate criticism for that. But this is much better fin stack design than we see on a lot of boards where they just do a giant chunk of aluminum. So they're at least turning that into small, like relatively thick fins. There's not a lot of them, but it's better than what we normally see. And then this looks like it's, I think they had this on the last one. What the hell? Yeah, okay. Oh, I remember this bullshit. This is so weird. They're still doing this, huh? So this, okay, I've done something wrong. Those were supposed to come out with it. Oh no. It's all come off the rails. So there's fan headers turned into a new, not proprietary 12-pin. That's what we've got there is a 12-pin fan. I would be frustrated every single day at work if I had to install this, but I guess they probably get pretty good at it. Well, anyway, we don't need that. The other one is normal. So I guess that we don't get the special cage over there. I'm guessing that is going to be for the hub or the lights. We'll just pull it though. Let's get rid of this fan header. All right, so this is ATX 12VO. Like actually this time, it's not the bullshit one that they've done in the past. So auxiliary ATX, that's going to be PCIe power through the slot as aux power. And then this is the actual motherboard power. So this is not proprietary. This is actual. We've checked it. We've checked the pinout on it this time because in the past, when we've checked, Alienware's ATX or Dell's ATX 12VO was not 12VO. They actually would use a 10 pin and then change the fucking pin out. So this one is 12VO, which means 12 volt only. So there's no 5 volt, there's no 3.3. It's a 10 pin header, and that's what we have here. So that's what that is. That is a real standard. There's not a lot of boards on the market, but there are some. That's just USB front panel. That's USB front panel. Everything's connected well so far. That is fully seated. So this is how it should look. It's level and fully seated on both sides. Let's pull that. God, this I thought this was maybe plastic when I looked at it. This is a massive piece of metal. That's expensive. Okay, so that's fully out. We're just gonna take the video card out for. Oh, that's cool. All right, that's kind of neat. I like that. You can see it's got these like teeth in here, and then they just socket into the end of the bracket that's attached to the video card, and then that screws in to hold it. That's pretty nice. I mean, it's totally unnecessary. Definitely very expensive. and a large part of it. But the reason they do this in a pre-built, I can get behind it because the whole problem with pre-builts and heavy video cards is that they break. We've had it happen in pre-builts in the past, just once, but where it'll rip the PCIe slot. So having this is to resolve that issue, hold it sturdy. Mechanically, Alienware has always been like impressive. It's just historically it's been in the least useful ways possible. Just a normal latch. They are still using a very large flow-through area, which is excellent. PCB cuts off around here, which is also where the 12-volt high power is, right there in the middle. And last time we tested this with the 40 series, the 4090, this design actually did surprisingly well for what it was. So we may test this separately. I'm not sure. A 5080 is a little less interesting than a 5090 because it's not going to be as much of a heat load and not too different from the 4090s we've looked at in the past. But let's keep going with this. So first thing I'm seeing here is this fully custom USB connector. So that is going to be USB 3.0. They've got it in at a 90-degree angle. They put this nice latch on it. I actually really like this. Anything special? So this is just HD audio, but they've got this protrusion on it to latch it in. That's a fan connector, nothing weird with that one. So they're sending data from the power supply to the board. SATA data, so that's one of the pre-wired ones. They've actually even socketed these. This is more SATA. More SATA, so they've all three of these are pre-wired. Everything installed properly. I will say I like that they've labeled almost every single cable. There's like one or two that don't have labels, but that's pretty nice. It's not necessary. It certainly makes it easier to maintain, makes it easier for technicians in the future. So power for the pump, obviously, and then LED for the pump block. So that's going to be EPS 12 volt. So we've got a 4-pin and an 8-pin for EPS 12 volt, both installed correctly. And now I'm going to remove the pump block. All right, there's our paste pattern. That is going to be a pad. So they've applied a PTM pad. Honeywell is the best known, but there are multiple vendors for them. They've been used in GPUs for a long time, but since at least 2018 that I remember with the high-end stuff and consumer. So the paste pattern, you can see from the pad, is a little more lacking here. And then hopefully we're going to find that imprint in opposition on the actual CPU. So on the CPU side, slight gap in coverage in the bottom corner down there. Doesn't matter. That's an okay spot. Slight gap here, possibly from when I peeled it up. And then heavier pressure in this rectangle right here with lighter pressure on the right edge, which you can tell by the paste pattern. So that's overall good. I also like that these are kept short and run straight into the board. I mean, this is the advantage that Dell has if they're designing the board around the system or vice versa. They can do this short run straight to connectors down here and not have to route it and snake it through the back of the case. Okay, this is a lot less stupid than past ones. That wasn't all the way in. That's the first kind of miss here. Just get all these. That one is. That's all the way. Oh, it's sticky on the back. Oh, wireless. Let's just go ahead and remove this. I'm just gonna let that float. They are mounting the kill management to it, which is definitely unnecessary. Some extra, you see all the places these small costs add up. Integrated I/O shield. And then, oh, there's the stickiness. So on the back. So this isn't like the best quality control at the SMT line level, where this yellowing that you see around where it's supposed to be white or gray PCB painted, that's flux. So this just didn't get thoroughly cleaned. It shouldn't hurt anything. It's just kind of ugly. So they've got a lot of just like still sticky flux, dried flux, just all over the board, which is just a manufacturing process quality control step. Now, I'm not going to ding them too hard for this because pretty much no one's ever going to see that as long as it doesn't cause an actual problem. And then they've got some bumpers here. Go ahead and pull the SSD. All right. Okay, that's good. So thermal pad was, there's no tape on it. It's clearly making contact, at least on the controller here, and then on some of the SMD parts there. Ooh, that's not great. That's maybe the only larger concern I have so far. It's a quote Kingpin. It's bending like a banana. You see that? That's not great. Okay, wow, you can see it from this side too. That is a hell of an arc. Holy shit, they really torqued the hell out of that. Oh my god. Look at this angle. You see that? It's like on this side. They're lucky they didn't snap this thing, man. That's not good. They shouldn't be doing that. That is I'm so disappointed because it's like we got so far and in the end it didn't even matter. We'll drop in as much of the sawn as we can before the copyright strike. Yeah, I mean, the SSD's bent the hell. Let's open it up and see if we can understand why it's so one-sided. Like, it's really heavy on that side.
Oh.
You see it?
Yeah, because I think it's got to be under the screw, not under the standoff.
Oh, yeah. I was so disappointed. We almost made it all the way. Wow. Wow, that's... Jesus, man. The whole damn thing's flexing. You can see it in here. They're so lucky this isn't just broken. I don't... With enough expansion contraction, like feasibly something could happen. Like PCBs are pretty flexible. I think they got lucky on this one, but that absolutely needs inspection from Dell and Alienware in the QC process. So standoff, the screw already came out. That's the standoff. It is definitely permanently very slightly arced as a result. All right, so looking at this further, this now explains why the imprint on this side is so heavy for the SMDs. Jesus, man, look at that. That's like so pronounced. Anyway, that can be worked on. For other stuff, so the video card, we talked about this last time. God, it's so gross. This is so nasty. Like, touching this is like, it's definitely dust. It gets stuck on your skin. So this is fresh from the factory dust, I guess, and it's even in here. So we have not had this card that long. I want to be very clear. This is not from my office. This is from Alienware's factory, here, Dell's factory. So they did this last time too. Specifically with the video card, specifically with the plastics, and we saw it on the back of the system also. So I think it's just they're not cleaning the stuff as it's getting made, or maybe it's sitting on the shelf for a long time in a dusty factory. I don't know, but the fin stack is at least clean. It's not like it's been used. It doesn't appear to be a used card. It's just gross. Socket looks good. Bottom of the CPU doesn't have any excess paste or anything on it. The rest of the system, I want to pull these out, and I want to pull this thing out. Let's start taking this apart. Okay. Oh, it's got a cable coming out of it. Okay. So this is a light bar. That's just a cable for the light. There's the light itself. It's just projecting down into the system this way. That's kind of old school. Let's just do the shroud. That looks like a power supply shroud screw to me. Oh. All right. Cool. That was easy. Just a giant guillotine. Giant cable guillotine. Another giant piece of steel. Am I going to have to pull? We've got screws here, I think, for just the whole tray, but can I get the fan out? Okay. I don't think it's supposed to come out like that, but it did. The bottom of the rubber things kind of almost socket in to this metal frame. This is so goddamn complicated. There's a lot of work for what they're doing here. So I guess this would frustrate me to no end, But I guess you would line it up, resocket the rubber, and then you would latch it. If you look down here, this fan is doing functionally nothing. So that's the power supply, and the fan's got like a couple millimeters of depth above it. It can't pull anything through the back, so and it can't pull through the sides, so it can only pull. Is there a hole? There's no hole here. So it's trying to get it from the bottom, I think. So this is really the place it's pulling the air through. Power supply cuts off somewhere around here. You'll see the outline of it. That's the only spot for that air to come up through. So the one that's backmost is doing fuck all, and then the one at the front is pulling a little bit. Man, this is like, that is a lot of vacuous space to pull air through. Not going to be a ton of pressure by the time it gets to the actual bottom of the case. So it's doing something, it's just not doing a lot. It's contributing noise for sure. There's probably there is a better way to do this. Doubling up also, where they've got a grill under it and a grill on top of it, so they're just adding impedance on top of impedance, where one of these two could go away, either this one or this one for the actual like metal mesh, and probably one of these two shrouds entirely could go away and open things up. And then we've got the factory dust problem, where at the right light angles you can see it's just like everywhere. It's just, we have not had this system that long, and if we had it this long, and all of this dust here and the GPU is getting through the filters, and that's a different problem entirely. So up on the top here, so they say support for a 420. I think you would need to remove this cage. I have not tried this yet, so I just want to make that clear. But there's this metal plate here, where sizing with this plate and with the cage, I'm not convinced a 420 fits in here without like losing a ton of actual accessible surface area to the fans. And so I think pulling this out would be the better approach, and then just mounting it straight to the top of the case or something. So anyway, let's do the last piece we have. Okay. Oh, that I like. This is so annoying. So they've got the cable routed through plastic. They are using the rubber things again in there. I'm not going to pull these ones out. They've got the fans numbered, which is nice, so credit to them for that. But let's measure the thickness. It's a 38, yeah, there it is. Pretty thick fans. It's basically the fractal torrent approach to fan thickness, which allows the 180s to actually drive air through the chassis. Let's get back into some of the test content. Back to the rest of the review. Alienware intends for this generation of Area-51 to be upgradable and expandable into the future. That's apparent in immediate ways, like the empty drive trays under the right side panel with pre-routed cables, which is something we like. Unfortunately, rumors point to LGA 1851 being a dead platform. LGA 1851 is the name of the socket in the motherboard that's in this computer. If that's true, there won't be any CPU upgrades. The GPU would be as easy to swap as in any normal PC. Space is plentiful as well. Alienware also claims support for up to 420mm radiators, which would fit in the top of the case. It gets weird when considering a motherboard swap. This is an ATX 12VO system, which means it would either need to be another ATX 12VO motherboard, or you'd have to also swap the power supply, which would be a shame. This is a chicken or the egg problem. There aren't many ATX 12VO motherboards in the DIY market, but Alienware is also not using something that's proprietary. This is a real standard. It's just not one that's heavily adopted by DIY motherboards. The only remaining really sort of weird thing for the upgradability is the so-called Alien FX board behind the right side panel. It's a combo platter of fan and light control, along with providing front panel connectivity. However, it doesn't have any fans connected to it. They're all directly connected to the motherboard, as normal, so they could be using this, but they're not. Alienware's idea here, we think, is that if you ever do swap the motherboard, you can buy the conversion kit. The kit hooks the Alien FX board to the new motherboard, and would then provide both light and fan control via the Alienware software. Frankly, it seems back-asswards to how we'd think this would go. It would make more sense to us if the stock configuration had all the fans connected to the Alien FX board, and then a future motherboard swap would just use the regular headers. So overall, the Area-51 is technically upgradable. It's just in a niche tech tree with a dubious future. The case is also covered in at least 7 QR codes that link to various sections of the manual. It's detailed, including this cool exploded diagram of of the system and a dedicated screw list. Normally, to get a dedicated screw list, you'd have to buy a GPU from NVIDIA or AMD. Alienware is actually making progress here, using ATX 12VO and LGA 1851 is a limiter, but the parts are standard. And that is a big improvement over the proprietary crap they've used in the past. Let's get into the benchmarks. We're starting with CPU thermals at steady state. The performance fan preset resulted in a huge temperature reduction versus the other options of 7.3 degrees Celsius on the P cores versus the stock balanced preset out of the box at 74.5 degrees Celsius. The quiet preset didn't change much and was roughly 1 degree warmer than balanced. E cores average and follow the same pattern. GPU thermals under automatic fan control are pretty much a wash and illustrate NVIDIA's maintenance of a target temperature from vBIOS. Here's a quick look at GPU temperature and its fan speed over time. The results are unremarkable except as a model for what this should look like. GPU temperature quickly climbed to the high 60s and the fans locked in at 50% after a few minutes. Definitely a lot better than what we saw with Origin, where it took 8 minutes for the fans to do anything. Other temperatures were mostly unremarkable, with the exception of the PCH temperature getting significantly more cooling with performance mode. Any of these results are acceptable for chipset temperature though, which is the PCH, so this mostly tells us just where the air goes. Next, we're manually controlling the fan speeds to do some A/B testing to evaluate Alienware's design choices. We connected all the fans to a Corsair fan controller, preloaded with PWM values that roughly correspond to the values at steady state under Alienware's control. The GPU fans were fixed at 50% here. We did stock testing with the front panel removed and with the top fans flipped to exhaust as well. Broadly speaking, removing the front panel had no meaningful impact on results and was within error. Top exhaust significantly improved drive temperature, GPU memory temperature, and GPU temperature for the core, with reductions of about 3 degrees plus or minus a bit in each. The GPU temperature in particular improves because of the better ability to utilize flow-through cooling, evicting warmed air out the top of the case in a straight path from the GPU. This naturally heats up the CPU radiator more, which means CPU temperature slightly increases. The CPU can take it though, and the GPU will actually boost slightly higher in frequency as a result of this. Likewise, the CPU temperature increase is less than the GPU temperature decrease. CPU frequency has been a key area of failure for several of the pre-builts that we've reviewed, usually due to poor thermals or power management. To Alienware's credit, that's not the case here. The Intel 285K with the 360mm liquid cooler and the fans at the performance preset only loses an average of 29 MHz across the P cores versus our original review of the 285K. The stock balanced preset gives up 115 MHz on average, and quiet falls behind by 145 MHz versus stock. A 145 MHz loss is large across all cores averaged and would be noticeable where performance is time-based, but because it's an optional fan preset, we're okay with it as long as users know about it. It's trading clocks for lower noise. At least that's the theory. We can validate it. Next up is testing in our hemi-anechoic chamber, which we built to evaluate noise levels of products. For this one, we'll use it to test the different noise levels of the different preset fan profiles, now that we know the trade-off for performance and for thermals, so we can get an objective look at the noise level. Here's the chart. The stock balanced profile idles around 21 to 22 dBA before spiking in response to the initial CPU load. This is measured at 1 meter distance. There's a faint extended stair-step pattern throughout the test duration before settling in at 29.7 average for steady state. The quiet profile follows much the same pattern, actually measuring slightly louder than balanced during parts of the test. This reflects the extremely similar thermal behavior we saw between balanced and quiet. Performance idle was around 24 to 25 dBA, ramping beyond 30 dBA quickly and then settling in at 35.9 at steady state. It's not objectively that loud, but by comparison to the reserved nature of the default curve, it's certainly a lot louder. Power's next. Measuring power at the wall during full system load shows only marginal differences between the three profiles, which makes sense. They're all sitting around 650 watts average at load. The most significant difference is elevated power consumption at idle when using the performance profile, which is due to the raised fan and pump speeds. Software setup is next. The Windows installation process was modified to include a registration form and agreements to Alienware's terms. We can never just get a clean Windows install from Dell. The good news is that you don't have to fill them out or agree to them. You can just press next. The bad news is that it doesn't tell you that. It doesn't seem like it's an option, but it is. After hitting the desktop, we saw that all drivers were present, but the NVIDIA driver version was 572.16 from the 50 series launch on January 30th. despite newer versions being available at the time of build. Also, one of the Intel drivers was even older, dating back to October 2024, even though much newer versions are available. Bloatware includes the Alienware Command Center, which is actually needed for fan and light control, Alienware Digital Delivery, Dolby Access, Killer Intelligence Center, networking, Microsoft Office, including Outlook (new), and Support Assist. This is a lot of crap for a clean install. It's not the worst we've seen. There weren't any antivirus solutions installed from McAfee or Norton, which is a major positive, but it's still a little bit bloated. Upon opening the Alienware Command Center, you get hit with text reading, "Welcome, gamer." Wow, now I feel like they're really one of us. The main page shows a few basic metrics like CPU, GPU, and RAM utilization, and also basic thermals. From here, you can choose performance profiles, which control the fan curves. Weirdly, the performance page claims that performance mode does this. Quote, GPU power consumption is increased above the rated power levels. Your system's graphics performance may be amplified while consuming more energy, end quote. That makes performance sound aggressive and like it's overclocked or something, and implies pushing beyond normal limits as defined by the GPU vendor, which is NVIDIA. This is a lie. It runs at the rated power levels, not above them, unless Alienware means above its own rated power levels rather than NVIDIA's, in which case that's misleading. Separately, the app claims it controls overclocking settings, but the custom profile gives neither clock nor power control. One huge miss here is the inability to set truly custom fan curves. All you can do is add a positive percentage offset to the existing base fan curve. It technically works, but it's awkward and deprives the user of actual granular control that you'd want if you made it this far. Detailed temperature readouts are split into 8 so-called zones. It would have been really cool if they used thermocouples or thermistors or something and actually placed them around the system, but they didn't. Instead, CPU, front, and top are all just the CPU temperature, and bottom is the GPU temperature. Moving on to packaging and accessories. The Area-51 came in a gigantic, heavy box. The outer box pulls off after popping the retaining plugs, revealing the foam-encased computer. There's even a chunk of foam shoved into the front panel opening, which is welcomed as attention to detail to prevent the front panel from getting damaged in shipping. The case itself was absolutely mummified in a ridiculous amount of plastic. Every panel, edge, and piece of trim was covered with plastic here. This is annoying to remove, it's unnecessary, and it definitely creates a lot of single-use plastic waste. Inside the case was a block of foam for additional GPU support. This we liked, it's great, it allows Alienware to ship with the GPU installed, rather than requiring user installation. There is the GPU support, which is made out of steel, but having this foam block will allow some absorption of that shipping process. The only included accessories are a basic keyboard and mouse, like the kind you'd get with any Dell system off the shelf, and that's it. The BIOS is Dell standard, with simple sections and a straightforward layout. Mildly interesting is the dust filter maintenance reminder setting, but it's disabled by default. This could be pretty cool if utilized properly. Thankfully, XMP and resizable bar were turned on, so a few points for that. Otherwise, there were no oddities in the BIOS settings. So Alienware's Area-51 is actually hugely better than the previous Alienware systems that we've reviewed. This is like the biggest possible compliment they could get from us. We're not starting the conclusion with, it's a piece of shit and you should never buy it. We're starting with, it's actually better, and companies like Origin do Alienware a gigantic favor by being the most incompetent in the marketplace with the system that we just reviewed. They didn't turn the fans on for 8 minutes during the load, so that kind of shows that point. But this is good. This is a big improvement. The build quality is better. Switching to actual standardized components, as in like ATX, hole spacing, no bullshit I/O on the front edge of the motherboard that's all soldered together, a normal power supply cable going into the board. So it's not this faked ATX 12VO where they're using not the same pin count or the same pin out or whatever. It's an ATX 12VO power supply. It's a bit abnormal in the DIY market, but it's a standard. And that's what's important here. And the same goes for the motherboard. The biggest mark against this entire thing that takes it down from an overall positive review to one with more criticisms is really that SSD. I mean, that is the number one mark against this. Personally speaking, as my own personal decision, if I opened a computer that I bought and I saw that amount of bend and curvature to the SSD, where it looks like an Intel IHS or something, with that curvature, I would not feel comfortable continuing to use that SSD. I'd replace it. And even if it's working right now, I personally would not want to put important data on it. and risk some kind of future problem, whether that's just from long-term exposure to that bend or from heating, cooling, expanding, contracting, things like that. Whatever the case may be, I'd replace it. And that sucks for something that's a 4 terabyte drive. Now, the dust and the dirt is also pretty gross in this, and it's something that they've had in past Alienware systems, so they have not improved it, where there's all this factory dust everywhere. It's inside the GPU shroud, it's on the back of the fan hubs, it's on the back of the system, on the cable management side of the case, and what we found is that as you use this, obviously the dust kind of gets loosened and ends up in the system itself, and eventually just accumulates in the fans or the coolers, and there's really no reason a system should be this dirty and kind of nasty out of the box. We don't normally see that. They're normally clean. So those are the two major marks against this, despite otherwise being overall positive. And also the price. The price being 50% over DIY parts cost. As a reference, the Thermaltake View series system that we reviewed previously, that was like 7% over DIY parts cost. Some of the other systems we've looked at, like Main Gear in the past, we see around 30% over DIY parts cost. So this is just, the 50% is really high. And that kind of kills it on value alone for us, despite all the other improvements. It works though, and again, because of the competition, it makes it difficult to argue on value sometimes, but it's still way too expensive. So here's how it breaks down. In a market where it's a roll of the device, if alternatives are even competent, some amount of people will be willing to pay extra just to get something that works. The build quality is good. I mean, it functions. The bloatware is not that bad. It doesn't come with a bunch of stuff that weighs down the system performance, just some unnecessary application. So it's really, I mean, I don't know, man. Origin has really, really lowered my expectations. So Alienware clearly took some of the criticisms about the former Aurora desktop seriously. It took them a while, but they did it. The case is heavy, it's somewhat elaborate, but it's actually kind of thoughtful in some places. The part selection is niche, and it may not have a clear upgrade path, but it's not proprietary. So that puts the fault more on Intel than on Alienware this time, though we'd like to see a 9800X3D option or something. ATX 12VO is rare again, but it is a standard, and it has efficiency improvements over regular ATX 12 volt. And if Alienware sticks with this, but lands on a more upgradable platform in the future, they may have a basis of a good formula. So the price is the worst part. We were able to find some alternative pre-builts with similar components for about a $700 to $900 increase over DIY cost, which would make those cheaper than this one. But we're working on getting those in to make sure they're actually any good first, because it doesn't matter if they're cheaper if they're no good. So we're working on that. So anyway, the system's actually good, and unironically, Alienware can get the It's Better Than Dell award. I mean, it is Dell, but it's better. Now we just need to see if Dell can improve its actual Dell name product lineup for gaming. Maybe we'll change the award permanently to It's Better Than Origin. It might be time to switch it if this is the direction everyone's going. Anyway, we bought the system to review. That's the review. If you want to support our ability to fully independently do these pre-built reviews, they are extremely expensive for us, and we do need the help because when they cost this much, it's hard to make any money on the video from just the ads alone. So you can go to store.gamersnexus.net if you want to support us, and if you want to get something cool in return, like our PC building mod mats, the large anti-static mod mats are on the store. You can also grab one of our coaster packs. We have 2 of them available, including with a motherboard debug coaster, an SSD coaster with the pinouts at the side actually is pretty cool. And we have another pack that includes a fan coaster, and it works really well. You wouldn't think so by looking at it, but we've got the gradient really nicely tuned on the blades. Additionally, you can grab some of our soldering mats, which are extremely high heat resistance, and all of that is on the store along with these shirts if you want to grab something to support us as we buy more of these to review. So next thing we're getting in is some competitors that are hopefully good, but a little bit cheaper as compared to DIY parts cost, because that'll help us reset our expectations. Because they've been so bad lately with all these pre-builds. So subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersnexus.net to help us out directly, or patreon.com/gamersnexus, and we will see you all next time.